Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Nigamaka Paturgalitam Phalam Shukamakaramita Japisamitam Pibata Bhagavatam Rashamarayam Mahora Hora Sikabhuvi Bhagaham Krishna Swadam Bhagate Damagani Shaha Karunashta Dushamisha Parana Kodunodidam Twamapiyadam Vishuddham Vibhusam Apyarayana Biram Biruksaram Prakyahidahur Mahoratat Madam Shankleshan Ravanamusanti Nanyadam Anarto Bhajamam Shakshad Bhakti Yoga Malakshara Logasajanato Chakra Satpada Samitam Atmanamasya Munaya Nagranti Korbanti Ivdikim Itam Bhutagana Hari Om Maganati Maranda Shangarangana Salakya Chaksurun Militam Yanatashmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sa Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Sa Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Sri Mati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Praskita Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Hare Hare. Good morning, it's Motivational Monday, and we'll just go back over the verses that I rendered from the verse that we're talking about, which is 9th verse in the 3rd chapter, the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam. This verse highlights the fact that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has no birth, no death, no flaw, no defect, no illusion. In human-like form, he's the one I respect. Rama, Krishna, avatars descending down low, showing the way, helping the soul to grow. He manifests on this earthly plane to restore Dharma again and again. Avatar descending. The definition of an avatar, according to Sridhar Swami, is an eternal form which appears within this material world to encourage us to get back to our eternal forms in the eternal spiritual world. The forms that the avatars manifest in this world are not temporary forms. They're not forms that are assumed based on one's decisions in one's past life, based on karmic reactions. The forms of the avatars are the eternal forms that eternally exist in the spiritual world, and they descend just as you come down from the 110th floor to the first floor in an elevator. You don't change form from the top floor to the bottom floor. The form that arrives on the bottom floor is the same form that got on the elevator at the 110th floor. Similarly, the avatars described or defined as that form of the Lord, and there are quite a few. There's Karma, there's Macha, there's Nrsinga, there's Parasuram, there's Rama. It's that form which has its eternal existence. It has its eternal world. It has its devotees who taste the particular flavor of relationship between themselves and that particular avatar, and has an eternal name as well. This is why the verse starts out by saying that the Lord has no material name, no material birth, no material death, no material flaw, no defect, nor any illusion. He simply enters into this illusory temporary world in his permanent eternal body to help us break the bonds of illusion, achieve freedom, so we can go back to home, back to Godhead from whence we come. The second verse here, Ala Charu. He's the Supreme Lord, defying comprehension. His actions are divine, beyond human dimension, saving the devotees, lifting them to the light, annihilating demons, ending their blight. Both achieved liberation of transcendental faith. Krishna's actions are not like our actions. We get angry at someone, we get carried away by passion, we pick up a rock, a weapon, we pull a gun out of a closet, and in a fit of unconsciousness, subconsciousness, animal consciousness, anger consciousness, demoniac consciousness, we kill that person and we send them to a terrible place, and thus ensure that we also go after death to a terrible place as well. But Krishna's actions are not like our actions. He never gets carried away. He's never subjugated by his senses. He's not subject to anger. He does kill. We read about many times that Krishna is killed, and yet his killing is not like our killing. He kills for one's own benefit, for one's good. Both the devotees and demons are sons and daughters of the Supreme Lord. He loves them equally. He shows no discrimination against them. But the only way he can benefit the non-devotees, the atheists and the demons, is by killing them, because otherwise, not believing in God, they have no checks. There's nothing they won't do in order to pursue their own selfish sense gratification. Therefore, left alone to their own devices, they would continue to compound their negative karmic reactions life after life after life after nonam pramata kurutevi karma yarindriya pritana tatsadamane surya. Nonam pramata, being maddened by the desire for sense gratification, having ended up in this particular body because of that feverish mentality from a previous life, one continues the pursuit of sense gratification, just like the animals, thus perpetuating that consciousness that you had inherited from a previous life and ensuring that in your next birth you'll take another material body. There's no end to this downward spiral, save and except if the Lord comes and, believe it or not, kills you. If he kills you through no merit of your own, but just because of the mercy of being killed, truncated by the Supreme Personality of God and seeing him at the time of death, through no merit of your own, just what we call causeless mercy, all your sins are expiated. And you can at least get a kind of impersonal salvation. You get relief from the weight, the burden of all your sinful activities. They don't bear you down to the depths in your next life. People generally want wealth, influence, power, long life, money in the bank. And yet in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami says, all these accoutrements are not helpful when you're in the water. When you're in the water, you don't want a crown weighing you down. You don't want a heavy coat absorbing water, making you 3 times heavier than you would be normally. You don't want boots. You don't want gold rings on your hands. You don't want metal filigree woven. All that will cause you to sink like a rock to the bottom of the water. Those things that we consider material assets are spiritual liabilities. So the Krishna kills the demons, divests them of all that they've worked for, and brings them back to a state of pristine possessivelessness. In which time, if they can't enter into the spiritual world, they haven't performed devotional service. They don't have the spiritual senses in order to assume their original spiritual form. So if they can't assume their spiritual bodies or reassume their spiritual bodies in the spiritual world, at least they can get a break. They can step apart from this samsara cycle of birth and death, disease, and old age, merge into the impersonal effulgence of the Lord Brahma Jyoti, take a breather, and then come back purified, come back without being crazed by all the desires for sense gratification. So the Lord loves both the devotees and the demons, but and they both achieve liberation, but the liberation that the envious achieve is slightly different, or actually quite a bit different than the liberation of the devotees achieve. The devotees get their full spiritual bodies. Those who are devotees are defined as those who have not spent their whole life avoiding devotional service of the Lord. Devotees are those who engage happily. They use their eyes to see the beautiful deity form of the Lord, their ears to hear the glories of the Lord talked about in class or sung about in kirtan, use their tongue to take prasadam and to speak about the Lord, their hands to sweep the floors of the temple. So even in this life, they're acting on the liberated platform. The liberated platform of the spirit soul is to have spiritually evolved senses with which one engage in the service of the Lord. So even now, so long as we have senses, we can use this material body in the service of the Lord, like Ambarish did, sweeping the temple floor, performing devotional chores, singing the names of the Lord. From the example of Maharish Sabai Mana Krishna Parada Vinda, we understand that when you, even in this life, engage all the senses in the service of the Lord, the spiritual body from within unfolds and starts to develop. Examples given that before a snake sloughs off its old skin, it's already developed the new skin. So for a devotee at the time of death to go back home, back to God is a formality because in a sense, one's already been doing all the self-same activities in this world that one would be doing in the spiritual world. And due to the Lord's mercy, by appearing before us in the deity form, there's practically no difference between devotional service in this world and devotional service in the next world. So the third verse here, don't mistake his actions for worldly affairs. He's Nirguna, untouched by material snares. His names, like Rama and Krishna, hold power untold. Chanting them frees the souls, breaks illusions' hold. Ajāmila proved it. His story is well known. By uttering Narayana, his spirit was shown. The path to transcendence, escaping the night. So chant Hare Krishna, and everything's bright. In that list of 6 things about the Lord which are not material that Gajendra mentions, Nam is foremost. The Lord does not have any material name. Consider Ajāmila, his story. Although he had a pious upbringing, about the time of puberty, probably 14, 15 years old, he got into bad company. He left his beautiful, chaste wife, took up with a prostitute, lived a common law marriage with her, produced children from her, committed crimes in order to support his family. And then finally, it appeared that it was time for him to pay the piper. He was on his deathbed at the age of 82. As might be imagined, the agents of the Lord of Death, the Yamadutas, had appeared within his room with nooses. They put the noose around the subtle body, the neck of the subtle body of Ajāmila, and they were dragging him away. At that time, Ajāmila called out the name of his youngest son, which fortunately for him, he'd named after Krishna, Narayana, not thinking of the Lord, not consciously chanting or reaching out or supplicating the Lord, just out of brazen banal material attachment, he shouted the name of his youngest son, Narayana, Narayana. Now, if Krishna or Narayana was material, what would that have done? It would have done nothing. The Yamadutas there wouldn't have even been a hitch in their steps. That would have given them no pause whatsoever. Narayana, meh, so what? Just continue to tighten the noose, drag Ajāmila's subtle body away for punishment. But actually his uttering the name of Narayana, even unconsciously, without thinking of the Lord, the name itself has a potency, it has a life of its own. So much so that it immediately gave pause to the Yamadutas. They were paralyzed, stopped right in their tracks where they were. And as they looked up, they saw the Vishnu Dutas, the agents of Lord Vishnu, coming from the spiritual world to intercede. They prohibited the Yamadutas from taking this most sinful person away for punishment. The Yamadutas had never experienced anything like this before. They thought that if anyone deserved punishment, it would be Ajāmila. And yet the story of Ajāmila tells us that the name of the Lord is not ordinary. If it was ordinary, Ajāmila could have chanted till the cows come home. It wouldn't have made a bit of difference. But just by chanting unconsciously, by unconscious, I mean he did not intend to invoke the name of the Lord, he got a reprieve. Rather than being dragged away for immediate punishment, there was a debate between the Yamadutas and Vishnu Dutas. A compromise was reached whereby Ajāmila would get 2 more years of life just to see what he would do. We can be forgiven from our sins by chanting the holy name of the Lord. It said it forgives you for more sins than you can commit. But the problem is, if you're habituated to sinning, even if all of your past sins are resolved, because of past habits, there's a good chance you're going to resume or take up those sinful activities on the day after. So Ajāmila was given 2 years just to see how he would do. He went to a temple in the foothills of the Himalayas, performed menial activities. He acted as a watchman during the night to keep the animals away. He would go early in the morning, get water, tend the pre-dawn Mangalarti, cut up vegetables in the kitchen, take the remnants of food taken by the holy men, listen to snippets of their conversations. And 2 years later, lo and behold, he'd not performed a single sinful activity. Rather, he filled his 24-hour days with devotional acts of piety. And when he did then leave his body, 2 years later, he got a completely different result from what he would have had he left his body without having once uttered the name of Narayana. Therefore, that name cannot be material. If Ajāmila got freedom from all of his sins and elevated the spiritual world, a process which was triggered by chanting the name of Narayana, then how in the world could the name of Narayana possibly be material? So the verse here says, don't mistake Krishna's actions for worldly affairs. That means his actions are not like our actions. He's Nirguna. That means he acts, but he does not act. He has a name, but he doesn't have names. He has a form, but he doesn't have a form. He doesn't, to say that he doesn't have a name, that he doesn't have a form, that he doesn't have action, doesn't mean that he doesn't have a name, that he doesn't have form, that he doesn't have action. It just means he doesn't have them like ours. Here's an example. You say, Caru's gaining weight. And then you follow that statement by saying, Caru doesn't eat during the day. Someone would say, well, that's not possible. It's not possible if you don't eat during the day. It's not possible then to gain weight at night. Isn't it, right? So the statement is made, Krishna has no material name. No material name. So one can conclude that it has no name altogether, or there is another alternative. Caru is gaining weight. He doesn't eat during the day, but maybe he's eating at night. That would resolve the apparent contradiction. So you say Krishna has no name. That doesn't mean he doesn't have a name. It means he doesn't have a name like us. Just like to say Caru is gaining weight, but Caru is not eating during the day. So there's another option that he's eating at night. So Krishna doesn't have a material name. Doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't have any name. It just means he has a name which is unlike ours. A name which you invoke, even the most sinful people, when they evoke, they get cleansed in their soul from the hold of illusion. The prime example of this is Ajāmila. It says, by uttering Narayana, his spirit was shown the path to transcendence, escaping the night. So chant Hare Krishna and everything's bright. And then, I think this is the last verse here. The fourth verse, though he walks among us in human disguise, don't be fooled by appearance, open your eyes. He's not bound by Maya, this cosmic play. He's the puppet master, guiding the way. His form is divine. His name is the key to unlocking the truth and setting you free. So rise above the mundane, the fleeting, the fake, embrace the divine for goodness sake. His name is the key. Think, if you will, to the pastime in the Ramayana, where Ram knows that Sita is across the ocean. He's got a monkey army willing to cross, but the ocean itself, the Sagra, that stretch of sea between India and Sri Lanka, was not cooperating. Ram had asked Sagra, the ocean, to allow him to pass, and there was no response. The ocean just did not respond to Lord Ram. So the waves just kept low lapping by the shore. Ram, for 7 days, he meditated with the purpose of having Sagra appear before him and agree that he'd be able to pass. And for 7 days, Sagra kept himself away. Finally, Rama got so angry that the waters of the ocean started boiling and bubbling. Then, being discomforted by the heat, Sagra came with folded hands And he said, now you've got my attention, Lord. Now I realize I thought you were just coming here as a man, but now I realize that you're the Supreme Personality of God. Rama's incarnation was as a man. Ravan's, the demon's boon was that he would not be killed by any gods or Gandharvas or Pishachas or Bhutakshas. But Ravan neglected to mention man. He didn't consider that men were strong enough of a threat. So he omitted them from his list of beings from whom he would be invulnerable. Therefore, Ram came as a man, finding a loophole in the boons of Ravana in order to kill him. So for most of Ram's pastimes, he acts as we would act. He accepts the limitations that we would have to deal with whenever challenges came his way. But there were a couple of exceptions, and one of them was in crossing the ocean. He resorted to his divine nature finally by causing the water to boil. That was only as a plan B. His original plan was just like a man, sit down and pray. But Sagar wasn't responding, or rather, let's say this, Sagar wanted to see Ram in his divine manifestation. He wanted to see Ram at least pull one supernatural trick out of his hat. He wanted Ram to show his cards, so to speak, by at least on one occasion resorting to the supernatural. And so Sagar kept himself aloof from Ram throughout the entire 7 days and nights Ram was praying. And he forced Ram to then resort to a transcendental rage and cause the waters to boil. Then Sagar was happy. He had prompted Ram to exhibit his divinity as the Supreme Personality of God. And then he came before Ram with folded hands, completely subservient and submissive, and said, Ram, yes, be my guest. I bless that you and your armies can cross the ocean. My point is that it took Ram, as an ordinary human being, in the role of an ordinary human being, it took him 7 days, and even then he wasn't able to accomplish his purpose of crossing the ocean. However, earlier, Hanuman, in trying to find the whereabouts of Sita, had come that same way previously, came to that same beach, and by one recitation of the name of Ram, he was able to jump single-handedly over that entire 800-mile expanse of ocean and land in Sri Lanka. So Ram, we say the name of Ram or the name of Krishna is non-different. The name is the same. So Ram and Ram's name, Ram and the Nam, they're the same. The Nam is the sound vibration, the incarnation of Ram. But the difference is that the Nam will take us to Ram. The Nam is so powerful that Hanuman was able to cross the ocean in one moment, whereas Ram, in the role of a human being, took him 7 days, and he still wasn't able to evoke the god of the ocean. So in many ways, Nam is stronger than Ram, so far we're concerned, because Nam, the name of Ram, is what empowers us. It's what opens the doors. It's what creates opportunities for us to go back home, back to God. There are innumerable statements about the supremacy of the name of the Lord, compared to yoga, compared to asceticism, compared to philosophical study, compared to philanthropy, compared to charity, compared to performing sacrifices, compared to temple worship. The king of all performances is Nam. That's why Nanda Maharaj, when he's being interviewed by Uddhava's there doing research work like a scholar, anthropological scholar, and he's trying to find out what's the quickest way to Krishna's heart, what's the quickest and most efficacious way to the lotus feet of Krishna. So he's asking Nanda Maharaj. Now, Nanda Maharaj is he on whose slippers, Krishna brings Nanda Maharaj's slippers on his head. So Uddhava says, what's your secret? Tell me, what's the key here? Nanda Maharaj says, the key is always chant the names of Krishna. Always chant the names of Krishna. The inhabitants of Vrindavan were not scholars, they were not yogis, they were not ascetics, they weren't rich enough to be philanthropists. Their business day and night was chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And think about that mantra itself, the Maha Mantra, the greatest chanting for deliverance. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. What do we have there? We have 4 names of Krishna, who is God, supreme, energetic source of everything. And we have 4 names of Brahma, who is also the manifestation of God in a human form. He's the same absolute truth, but in his pastime as Ram, mostly 99%, with the exception I just mentioned, he's limiting himself to the role of a man. So we've got 4 Krishnas and we've got 4 Ramas. What do we have 8 of, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? What do we have 8 of? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We have 4 in the first stanza and we have 4 in the second stanza. Hare, there are 8 Hares, 4 Krishnas, 4 Ramas, 8 Hares. Who is Hare? That's Radha. Radha is that personality through whom we reach Krishna. Radha is the name. Radha is the Shakti. Nam nama kiri bahuda nija sarva shikstish tatami atanimitesh marana kalahai tadishi tavabara durdai dishami ajani nanuragaha. Krishna, you are so kind that you make yourself available. Krishna is not available. He's not available. It's like the president of the United States. It's just, he's not available to us. We have no access to the president of the United States. But if we know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows the president, then we might get access through that chain, the authorized chain, if we observe the protocol. So we have no access to Krishna. But Krishna has expanded himself in the form of Sri Radharani. Radharani is his pleasure potency. And she is endowed with all of the devotional arts. She knows how to please Krishna by speaking, by dressing, by walking, by dancing, by cooking, by making flower garlands, by chastising him. She is the personification of Krishna's pleasure potency. And she is Hare. So when we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, we enable ourselves to do something which we on our own would not be able to do. We enable ourselves to do something which even Krishna or Rama would not be able to do. We enable ourselves to approach Krishna through Srimati Radharani. That's why Radha's name is mentioned twice as often as the Maha Mantra. Because as far as we're concerned, we don't get direct access to Ram. We don't get direct access to Krishna. We only get that access to Radharani, who then introduces us to Krishna. The deity form of Radha generally has a flower she's got in her hand. So we often envision that Radha's turning to Krishna and giving her this flower. And she says, this flower comes from Caru. This flower comes from Lilavati. This flower comes from Bhavi. And that's how our service becomes known to Krishna through Hare, through Radha. And we access that energy of servitorship by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram. Atasi Krishna Namadi, Nabhaveguram, Shevan Mukhi Jevado, Shwayami Bashpadadhyaraham. Atasi Krishna's service begins with the tongue. Of all the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and difficult to control. Tongue is wagging all day long, speaking this, that, and the other thing, eating this, that, and the other thing. It's hardly a moment when the tongue is not about some business. So if we can engage the tongue, according to the instructions of the spiritual master, in speaking about Krishna, chanting Krishna's name, elaborating on Krishna's glories, and taking only vegetarian food, which is offered to the Lord, then that jumpstarts our service to the Lord. And from chanting, from focusing the mind through the practice of invoking the mercy of Krishna through Radharani, everything will fall into place step by step by step by step by step. Look what it did for personalities mentioned in the Bhagavatam and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And in the Ramayana itself, Ajāmila were the biggest rogues, rascals, thugs, hooligans in Bengal at the time. And yet, some or other, they began to chant the name of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and were reformated up to the highest level of saintliness. Thousands and thousands of people, once they heard that through the chanting of the holy names, because of the Sankirtan movement, Nityananda and Haridas, these two murderers and thieves and robbers and drunkards had given up all their bad habits and become devotees of the Lord. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people were so impressed that they also followed their footsteps and became devotees of the Lord. We also read about the story of the prostitute who came to seduce the young sannyasi Haridas Thakur. She was offered her own house. The Muslim magistrate said, I'll buy you your own house. I'll make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. All you have to do is do what you do professionally. Professionally, you lure men with your charms. So I just want you to do what you're good at doing. With regard to Haridas Thakur, when he's performing his bhajan in a lonely part of the forest after nightfall, go to him with your best dress, your most graceful, alluring walk, your most aromatic perfume. Speak to him with your soft voice and draw his mind to you. That's all you have to do, and I will fulfill all your desire. But rather than seducing Haridas, Haridas seduced her. How? By the chanting of the holy names. She sat there while Haridas finished his rounds each and every night. He used the pretext that I have promised to chant so many rounds, and I've got these many rounds to do, and I've only got an hour till midnight. And so if you'll just sit with me and let me finish my rounds, then whatever time there is between the time I finish my rounds and midnight, I can spend with you. But then at midnight, I'm going to have to start chanting my rounds for the following day. So for 3 days, the prostitute sat with him while he finished his rounds. Of course, he didn't finish his rounds till midnight. So he wasn't able to spend time with her, at least carnally. And so because as soon as he finished his rounds, then he would have to start all over again. So you might think she was frustrated. At first she was, but as the 3 days sort of spun out, as they unrolled, she got a taste for the name. The name captured her head and foot. The name attracted her mind. Here was a lady mired in sinful activities. She made her living through alluring men and taking money, selling her body, and she was very good at it. And here was her chance to actually retire and get enough money from the Muslims. She wouldn't have to do that anymore. And yet the name defeated her habits. It defeated her desire for wealth and notoriety. It defeated her lifestyle, defeated her sinful activities, so much so that she then surrendered to the name and took Haridas Thakur's place. He confided in her that he had intended on leaving that place 3 days prior. But when he came and she bowed down before the sacred Tulsi, he thought, she's a devotee. I need to spend a few more days here until that latent devotion within her comes out. Therefore, Haridas Thakur delayed his departure for 3 days while he nurtured her and guided her, and she became a devotee. Finally, after 3 days, when she herself espoused the practice of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Finally, Haridas Thakur blessed her, gave her his ashirvads, and he left. In his place, she sat down and she began chanting so many names of the Lord. Kind of reminiscent of Jagai and Madai when the people of Bengal learned that these two rogues had become devotees, hundreds and thousands of people became devotees. Similarly, in this area, when people learned that this prostitute had become a devotee, that she was no longer selling her body, but that she was enraptured by chanting the names of the Lord, thousands and thousands of people became a devotee. These stories show us how Krishna uses our tests to become our testimonies, how he uses our messes to become our messages. And there's one more story that comes to mind from the Ramayana. The author of the Ramayana, whose name was Valmiki, previously was not such a saintly person. The story of his previous life was that he was also a robber and a murderer named Ratnagara. He would waylay travelers along the roadside, rob them, and sometimes even kill them for the benefit of his family. But one day he attempted the same to the passing sage Narada Muni. Narada Muni induced him to try an experiment. Narada Muni said, if you chant the name of Ram, you'll be able to give up all these murderous propensities. However, the problem was that Valmiki was not able to chant the name of Ram. His meditation was on death, destruction, larceny, armed robbery, thievery. So Narada Muni said, then because your meditation is on death, chant the name of death instead. And Valmiki said, what good will that do? Narada Muni said, try it. The name of death is Yamaraj, but he's known by the nickname Mara. Valmiki started chanting Mara, death, Mara, destruction, Mara, misery, Mara, pain, Mara, robbing, Mara, larceny, Mara, sadism, Mara, Ram, 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 Ram. And you see what happened there. After chanting Mara repeatedly, it came to Ram. The result of which was that Ratnagara became completely purified. He became absolved of all the past sinful activities. And with this practice, to which he'd become habituated, he was safe from falling back into past patterns of life. Like I said, you can be forgiven for your sins, even by one recitation of the name of God. But your real problem then is how to change your past habits, how to start from the morrow in the paths of the saintly people instead of the paths of the sinners. That's very easily accomplished once you have a taste for chanting the names of the Lord. Once you begin to focus your consciousness on Krishna by the practice of chanting, then you're going to want to eat Krishna prasad. Then you're going to talk about Krishna. Then you're going to want to serve Krishna in the temple. Then you're going to become all Krishna oriented, beginning with the chanting of the holy names. So Narada Muni tricked Ratnagara into chanting, first of all, the name of Mara, then that became the name of Brahma. And eventually, not only did this sinful man become divested of all his sinful reactions, but then he just segged quite naturally and seamlessly from his sinful life into the role of the author of the greatest story ever told, the epic of the Ramayana. So you can't even imagine what beneficial, astounding results can proceed from the starting point of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And it's because of the example which is set in these and many other stories that Gajendra is asserting very, very poetically and very forcibly and very unequivocally that Krishna has no name. But by saying Krishna has no name, it doesn't actually mean he has no name. It means he has a name, but the name is not like ours. Just like if you say Krishna's not eating it during the day, he's eating at night. No, True is gaining weight, but he's not eating during the day. So the conclusion is that True's eating at night. So Krishna has no material name. That doesn't mean he has no name, but it means he has a spiritual name, which is so powerful that it can deliver Krishna, it can deliver Ram, and in the course of doing so, purify one of more sins than one can commit. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thanks for joining us, those few of you who did. This has been Motivational Monday. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare